of the world. I'll be starting with my story and how I learned to interpret numbers. This story started for me in 2016 in the Amazonian rainforest. I'll then be explaining the fascination with numbers and why they are both the most and least complex form of language simultaneously. In the next part, I will explain how numbers are everywhere and how literally everything can be broken down into a numerical form. Then how numbers are related, at least in some way, to the spiritual experience from a physiological perspective. Then I'll be talking about the collective mind, duality, and how the patterns of 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4 can be used to transcend this duality. Then I'll be going into birth numbers and name numbers, which work as our essence, and then birth charts, which can work as a roadmap. Then I'll be following this up with interpretations of the numbers 0 to 9. And there may be a few little treats on the way too. So my story, I have a little bit of a strange story about how I learned to interpret numbers. I've always had a bit of an interest in numbers, and what I mean by this is when I was a kid, I was into maths over English and always developed my own ways to do arithmetic and things. I always looked at numbers as something significant and was working out interesting codes and stuff as a kid, but in terms of numerology and maths as an academic subject, I didn't really know too much about it, and I certainly didn't see it as a language that housed everything. It must have been around 2009, 2010 that my life got really weird. A box opened. I had a Kundalini awakening during a meditation experience, and things changed. My perspective changed, my friends changed, and literally everything as I knew it dissolved, and I started living in tune with a different moral compass. This definitely came with some huge challenges. I would say over this time I experienced real extended periods of darkness 3 times, feelings of despair and not knowing who or what I am. One minute I was sitting in pubs drinking, smoking, watching football, things like that, and then the next I was sitting in other dimensions and shattering the illusion that I thought was real life. The timeline jump was a real shock to the system, but I've started to realize that a slap around the face is sometimes the only way to awaken to something higher. I recently realized that the thing causing this perpetual state of misery is attachment. All suffering is a result of either wanting more of something or wanting less of something. When I had the Kundalini awakening during meditation, I entered a bliss state, which can only be described as pure nirvanic bliss. I was able to replicate a similar feeling on an almost daily basis for a while, and I started to believe that this was what a spiritual awakening is, stepping into pure ecstasy and never leaving. This was great while it lasted, however, it was very painful when it stopped. I became extremely attached to the feeling of bliss, and when this happens, being that we live in a dual world, the only road this can lead to is disappointment. So when what we would label as darker feelings surface, it's common to do the opposite of clinging and avert the feelings and push them away. And when this happens, the cycle of clinging and pushing away can get hold of you, and did so in my personal circumstances. This was a very important learning curve, and one which I'm still continuing to this day. But after 6 months of bliss, which was followed by 6 months of real darkness, I did manage to become conscious of this process and how it was causing me suffering. It was in 2014 that things got really interesting. This was the moment I stepped out of this worry and attachment of how life should be and decided to embrace the mystery. I let go, followed the white rabbit, and really just embraced the mystery of life as a game. Again, nothing was perfect and it didn't come without challenges, but this was the first time in my life that I felt free. One of the things that came up during this period was ayahuasca. And ayahuasca is a visionary brew. Its effects differ from person to person, but it allows you to heal trauma, commune with spirits, and it's not really a psychedelic in the sense that you would think when you compare it to like a typical acid trip. It's something so powerful that should be used with the utmost care and respect. And I would say only do it if you've been called, which you'll know when it's happening. And if you have a disciplined practice, it's important to have this grounding that goes along with these experiences. In a nutshell, a calling is when you get urged by a spirit or whatever you call it to do something. If you're unsure, if you're being called to doing something, then you're probably not, as it becomes very apparent when it's happening. The opinions on ayahuasca vary from shaman to shaman, and different people have different experiences. But just from my personal experience, I spent years in daily meditation, was quite happy and comfortable with life before I drank, and it derailed my life and turned my world upside down. With this being said, it also helped me in unimaginable ways, and overall for me, it was a worthwhile and beneficial experience. Just so you know, this does all link with numbers, so if you just stay with me, I can go into that a little bit more. So it was when I started to live freely in around 2014 that I got the ayahuasca calling. I had dreams, visions, and lots of really crazy and strange stuff was happening. There were animal synchronicities, number synchronicities, and what actually happened when I reflect upon it now was the universe started to talk to me. That was the only way that I can really explain it. If I had a decision to make, I would ask for the answer, and it would show up in a dream or a synchronicity or something. I actually started to make friends in this way too, and what was also super trippy is the friend that I would make would fully understand, what I was talking about. Like I'd message someone saying something like, "Hey, you have 1,111 friends, and we have 33 friends in common. Let's be friends." And they would respond with something like, "Oh, you see 1111 or 33 is my number," or whatever. Like they just kind of like got what I was talking about. And literally, some of the people I speak with most these days, I do so as a result of these kind of events. Anyway, after 2 years of what many would label as madness, but I would label as a more tuned in version of our true reality, I had the opportunity to go and drink ayahuasca. And on 2 weeks' notice, I headed off to the Peruvian jungle. It was in my first ceremony that I saw a cube. It contained every color and colors I've never seen before. It was intense, bright, and beautiful. I was willed towards it, and I placed my head in this box. I felt waves of intense power, which are really hard to explain with words. And after this experience, I asked the medicine what it was that I saw. And I know that might sound a little bit crazy, but that is how this substance works. You can communicate and you get a response. And the response I got was I saw the word Ucho. I was going through my notes the other day, which I wrote after this first ayahuasca ceremony, and in the notes I explained the experience as follows. My body was taken over, my breathing was erratic. Sometimes I would just suck in air through my mouth. Sometimes I would exhale for extended periods. My body moved in the way the medicine wanted it to move. It felt like my genetic code was being upgraded. My spine clicked and recalibrated. I was given shamanism by Ucho. I'm not sure who Ucho is right now, but I was handed the gift of healing from him. After speaking with my shaman, she told me that Ucho is a tribe from Mexico, and this is another chapter of my adventure that I'm yet to take. However, from this moment, I started to see numbers as a code, and either the gift was unlocked in me or it was given to me. With all this in mind, I have to be honest and say I'm still learning as I go, but every once in a while I get another piece of the code. I find that with intention, I'm able to work out what a number means. Some numbers are incredibly simple and easy to understand, and others have real complex and specific meanings. So that is how I started on this path of numerology, and ever since I've been fascinated with numbers. So what makes numbers so interesting? Numbers are the cosmic joke in action. They are the language with both the most and least words. What I mean by this is numbers are infinite and they never end. you can always add another 0 or multiply it by 1 million, and there's going to be a numerological representation of that number that has some kind of meaning. Not only are they infinite, but they also have infinite infinities between each number. What I mean by this is 1 goes on to infinity, but between 1 and 2, there are also infinite variations of 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, but also 1.11, 1.12, and 1.13, and so on to infinity. So there's just infinite infinities between every infinity. So it's a little bit mind-boggling. With this in mind, the entire language of infinite infinity is all just variations of 0 to 9. Anything after that is just a combination of these numbers. So if you can learn the meaning of 0 to 9, then 4,782 can be deciphered, meaning by learning 10 characters, you're also learning an infinite amount of infinities. It is not exactly as black and white as this, as we have master numbers and weird numbers that don't make much sense, but in a way, all multiple digit numbers are related to their singular digits that make them up. It is a strange paradox that begins with 0. 0 is not actually a number. It's what dark is to light, being that dark is the complete absence of light. 0 is the complete absence of numbers. The measurement of nothing with 1, and in a way all other numbers being the opposite to that. Numbers are everywhere, and everything in existence can be broken down into a number. My understanding of numbers is they are a code and the architectural structure of the universe as we know it. We measure time by numbers. When we talk of our bodies, we often do so in numbers. We have 8 fingers and 2 thumbs, 2 visible eyes, and the inner eye, which is your first eye, and not the third eye as many people refer to it. This is the very simple stuff when it comes to our bodies, but what many don't know is that we are made up of these geometric patterns from the micro to the macro. I often get a little bit lost in the more scientific and mathematical side of numbers, but we are made up with specific ratios such as the Fibonacci sequence, and this is the sequence you can see on the slide. The sequence is when you take 0 and 1 as the first numbers in the sequence and add them together to get the next number in the sequence. Then you keep adding the sequential numbers to get the next in the code, meaning 0 plus 1 equals 1. So there you have 0, 1, 1. Then you add the last 2 digits, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So you have 0, 1, 1, 2. Then 1 plus 2 equals 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5. 3 plus 5 equals 8. 5 plus 8 equals 13. And what happens when we do this is eventually there is a ratio between the numbers called the golden ratio, which equates to around 1.618. This basically means the growth of around 61.8% on the last number for every sequential number. What is fascinating about this pattern is we see it as a growth pattern for much of nature, again from the microscopic all the way up to the spiraling universe. It is found in plants, the trees, the human body, as I mentioned, and pine cones. Pine cones are symbolic of everlasting life, and you can see them on staffs in ancient Egypt. The Pope has one on the little stick he carries around, and they can be found across the planet in many different cultures as a symbol of spiritual significance. The reason I mention this is because we actually all have our own little pine cones inside our brains in a gland called the pineal gland. This is referred to as the third eye, although as I mentioned before, first eye is more accurate as it is formed prior to the other 2 eyes after conception. And while debated by some, it is thought that this gland releases dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, which produces altered states of consciousness. DMT is found in plants, animals, and the human body, and when extracted correctly and smoked or ingested with complementary substances, it will blast you off into another dimension, and in my case, I learned numerology overnight. Others have visions, heal trauma, and all kinds of crazy things can happen, including some really disastrous side effects, mental breakdowns, and so on, The undebated part of the pineal gland is it produces melatonin, which is the hormone that allows us to sleep and dream. And I don't know about you, but for me, dreams are incredibly abstract and weird. It's certainly not me thinking the dream. It's more as if we access the dream world and process it from our perspective, or use our processing system to process the dream. Also, when we analyze our dreams, there is always a symbolic meaning behind them, and dreams can work as a guide for waking life if you can learn to understand their meaning. This may feel like I've completely gone off topic, so to bring it back, these experiences are a number at the base understanding of it. The golden ratio, that is the code for all there is, exists within us in the pineal gland and produces altered states of consciousness when triggered. It also exists within our bodily ratios. For me, this signals design, but this is only my perspective. But a good contrast of this, where we have used numbers as design, is binary code. This is the code we use for computers, software, and the internet. Literally, another universe which is highly intelligent has been created by human beings, and we use numbers for that universe. Numbers can be open for interpretation. I hope you like the little slide. It's a little bit of an optical illusion. What I find exciting about numbers, and many Western scientists would squirm at this, is the fact that you can take a number and interpret it specifically for you. 3 could mean you're going to have a baby, and it could also mean the balancing of your mind, body, and spirit. This may seem confusing to start with, but it doesn't have to be that way. We are so restricted in our language, we can actually barely communicate with our spoken words. It's really quite astonishing what we've managed to achieve with this bland form of communication. The real issue that stems from the spoken and written is the ability for deception. The president can say, "I'm putting America first," or "I love the American people," but act in a way that does not match the words. The essence of language is lost, and I believe that we are far less susceptible to deception when we learn to interpret language in other forms. For example, body language, energetic and intuitive language, and in this case, numerological language. I want to also say that this is not superior or the holy grail of language. In fact, it's not even a complete language, but a form of language. If I want you to pass me the salt, for example, the best thing I can do to you is to say verbally, "Please, can you pass me the salt?" Or if you're a little bit more connected with someone, sometimes your body language will tell them before your mouth does, But when I want something very specific, such as someone passing the salt, I don't really want to be speaking in a metaphorical language which is entirely open for personal interpretation. So if certain numbers show up in your life, it's not necessarily saying the message is X, Y, Z in black and white. To my understanding, it's saying you have the intuitive power to understand this message, and I will continue to show and be a teacher for you until you understand what it is that I'm trying to portray to you. It is mystical, and when you embrace it, it can become the roadmap for navigating the matrix. The collective mind duality, and how the patterns of 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4 can be used to transcend this duality. Before I go into how you work out your own personal numbers, I want to briefly touch upon something with a visual representation of what this actually means. There are very real laws to the physical reality, and there may be variations of these laws, but to my understanding, there are 7 actual laws in which all can be understood, or all as we know it can be understood. My understanding of this has come from the Hermetic teachings, which states that there are 7 principles. The first is the law of mind, and how everything in our physical reality is conceived in the mind. This, of course, could be debated for natural phenomena, but my understanding of natural phenomena is it's created by a mind, but a mind that is far more complex than ours. Or in a sense, the same mind, but, like a more complex operating system of that mind. But moving to the constructed world, if you see a building or a car or any large or small creation, you may look at this as a physical object. However, it was conceived within the mind and while it may be tangible now, it is only the physical realization of a thought, meaning it is the mind manifested. The six preceding laws, in a sense, are variations of the same law. The law of correspondence. This states that everything has different planes, and that in a way those planes are the same thing. They use the sentence as above, so below, as below, so above. A good example of this is the sky and the earth. The sky absorbs the rain and the etheric substance that the earth produces. The sky appears very different from the earth, but they're both just parts of the same. The same goes for the microscopic and macro world, or the physical and spiritual. The next is the law of polarity or duality. This states everything in the known existence is dual. Hot and cold are merely measurements of temperature at different variants. For every force, there is an opposing force. For every emotion, there is a counter emotion, and so on. The law of vibration. This states that everything in existence is a form of vibration, from the most gross and dense material such as lead to the highest vibrational ether, which can be something you can't see or sometimes feel, but it is there. The next is the law of rhythm. This states that everything has its ebbs and flows. An example of this is human emotion. It goes up and it goes down, regardless of how much work you've done to balance it out. The rhythm is constant, moving flow, which never stays still. Birth to death is a constant rhythm of impermanence. The law of causality. This states that nothing just happens, but every effect is the result of the previous cause or causes, and the current cause is creating the next effect. And the last is the law of gender. This states that everything contains the characteristics of gender, masculine and feminine, or a mixture of both, or would they all contain masculine and feminine, and in some degrees. The reason I'm sharing this is because these dualities help us to navigate the physical reality. And as you can see on the screen with the triangle thing that I've drawn, it's a visual and metaphorical representation in the triangle, and the code of 1, 2, 3. You see these dualities could be thought of as two because they have two ends. The pole has two ends, but the two ends are just ends of one thing. So if you look at the bottom line of that triangle, it's the sweet spot in the middle, which is actually the third component, or the middle ground, of which helps you to transcend to the next level. So when you look at the triangle from the bottom line, you have the duality, but the top point of the triangle is found in the center. So we actually transcend duality by understanding both sides, but then walking the middle path. Then the code of 1, 2, 3, 4 has the next component of 4, and 4, to my understanding, is the physical reality. This to me is the code of perfection, as it equals to 10. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10, and means we live a physical life of equilibrium by understanding and riding the middle ground of duality. We're not supposed to feel high all the time. We're not supposed to feel low all the time. We can find a middle path which from time to time will enter both the highs and lows, but not to the extreme where it creates total imbalance. Okay, now we're going to move on to birth numbers, and this is a good time if you can grab a pen and a calculator, if you have it. You might not need a calculator if you can just work it out, but sometimes it's easier, just because I don't want to skip by and anyone misses it out. So the way we work out our birth numbers is to find the double-digit number derived from all single numbers. Sometimes the sum will be a single number, but there are really not that many birth dates that create a single number, and it is only relevant to those born after the year 2000. But if this is the case, you will only have one birth number. So to do this, you take your birthday, If you can look at the screen, you can see the example. If you were born on the 17th of February 1984, you take 1 plus 7, which is 17, and then you add it to 2, as February is the second month, and then you add the 1, the 9, the 8, and the 4. This equals to 32, so your number would be 32, but then you add them together and you get 5. So in this case, 32 and 5 would be your number. Your birth number is your essence. It's the unchangeable part of you and related to who you are at your core. This can lead to a better understanding of what you should do in your work and hobbies. The truth is we know these things at our core, but this, like any other work like this, is just a reminder of who we are. We're remembering, not necessarily learning. So now we're moving on to name numbers, and this part's a little bit more tricky, but not too hard. Using the English language, we have 26 characters. If you're working with a different alphabet, you just work it out according to your alphabet. Each letter in that alphabet can be assigned a number. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc. Like as you can see on the screen, if you need to know. So we do the same as for the birth dates, but for the letters in your name, and you create a separate number for each name. And it's just the single digits we're adding as well, right? So for me, Luke is L is 12, U is 21, K is 11, and E is 5. So 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 5, which equals 13. So my numbers for my name Luke would be 13, and 1 plus 3 equals 4. So there's 2 numbers there for me. And you just repeat the same process for your second name as well. These numbers are similar to your birth numbers in meaning, but not so permanent, as you could always change your name. Often between your numbers, it tells either a consistent story or different components of your numerological makeup. Keep a note of these, and I'll be talking about the number meanings from 0 to 9 at the end of the live feed. So the next one we're moving on to is birth charts. So for birth charts, I use day, month, year system for past, present, future, meaning the day of birth gives some of the past trials and tribulations you may have faced, or and the present is representative of the month that you were born, with the year of birth being the potential for future. I use the word potential as the future is not set, and as I mentioned earlier, everything is cause and effect. The behavior you engage in now lays the path for your future. Regardless of any reading or external guidance you receive, we are still in control of our own destiny, and well, at least that's my understanding of it. So again, using the same date of birth, the 17th of February 1984, your chart will read 17 as past, which would be 17 and or 8. Then the present will be 2, and the future will be 84, or 12, or 3, because you add the 8 and 4 and you get 12, and then you add the 1 and the 2 and you get 3. So yeah, if you just take a second to write all that stuff down, I'll give you like a minute or something, and then you can I'm going to go into the number meanings to explain the numbers from 0 to 9. For the number meanings, I just want to make it clear that not every number will necessarily be relevant, and it's up to you to make sense of them. Meaning 13 could be 1 and 3, or 4, or a combination of the two. Also, with the interpretation of each number, not all the meanings will be relevant to you. This can seem a little strange, as we're used to a more literal language but it really works if we can be flexible. This is why what I would say for now is to write down the bits that you feel relevant to you for the numbers in your name, birth date, and chart, and then see the story that it tells after. So we start with 0, and 0 is the start and the essence of all numbers. As I said earlier, it's not actually a number, but the thing which any number things can be measured against. Nothing is needed to have something, and without it, we wouldn't be able to measure all the rest of the numbers in the sequence. 0 is what God is to a human being. Before I actually go into these numbers, I just wanted to say, like, I talk about God in this presentation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like God, like a man in the sky God, or, you know, because I know there's a lot of stigma around words like God, and I don't want this to be like that. This is your understanding of whatever it is, like the creator, or whatever, like that could be science, that could be, you know, whatever it is that you believe in. So I don't want there to be any stigma around this, but God is the most agreed upon metaphor for what it is that I'm speaking about. But this is not like necessarily religious in nature, unless that's the way you perceive the world. So 0 is what God is to a human being. It is the human, but the unseeable essence of the human, which resides in all. This is why I see 0 as the unmanifested God. 0 is also cycles such as karma, birth, rebirth, death, and repeating cycles. This could come in the form of a lesson or lessons that repeat until you understand their meaning. It is also like a magnification, meaning it adds significance when placed with other numbers. An example is 3 could be mind, body, and spirit, but 30 could be you needing a real in-depth understanding of the mind, body, and spirit. Or 1 is the start of a cycle, but 10 is the start of a new cycle, meaning within the 10 there is all that can be learned from the 9 previous numbers. And this is something that can be reflected upon in the new cycle. It's like the next level to the number it stands with. Next is number 1, and 1 is single or anything that can be represented by 1. So the self would be 1, or another person would be 1. 1 could be an inanimate object, such as a book, a table, or any one thing. 1 could be the compartmentalization of the self, so taking one specific part of us to focus on. For example, the mind or the body or the soul as a standalone thing. Giving and receiving would be represented by 1. Consumption, being selfish, and the ego are all also 1. 1s tend to be the lone wolf, someone of fierce independence, the king, the warrior, and the person who is not afraid to make decisions. 1 is also the very start of the first cycle. It represents the innovative and those who can make something from nothing. But also God is the most simple manifestation of 1, as God is the only one single thing in existence, which we are all components of. 1 is the most simple of numbers, but also the unmanifested singular. As you can see in the image next to the 1, it's just a single line. That's the shape that we can make from 1. I mean, we can make a circle as well, but like that's the thing that is represented by 1, just a line. 1 is the first step on the staircase in which you cannot see the next step. 1, when combined with other numbers, often represents the needing to bring that specific piece into our world. It can also work as a bridging number. So 312 could, for example, could be understanding the dualistic nature within the Trinity, like what I spoke of earlier. Also, when mirrored, making 11 and combined with other numbers, this is your role in transition from one place to the next. 1111 is a good example, which lots and lots of people see, as, to my understanding, this is a transition to a transition, meaning we don't actually know where we're going, but we're going somewhere, and it feels like we're moving in the right direction. It's kind of like taking the leap of faith. This is the reality in life. We don't always know what's going to happen, but we must have faith to take the leap regardless. And also the probably the most obvious representation of one is it's about unification and like oneness. So two is duality, which I've spoken about a lot in this, and it also reveals two sides of the same pole. This is the material world, as if you look at all that exists within physical reality, it is dual in nature. Two can be the exploration of these dualities. And it is my belief that to fully understand a subject in physicality, you must step into both sides of it. For example, if you're a doctor, you must build up your theoretical knowledge before you start to treat people. However, without the practical application of this knowledge, you will never be a doctor. So you need to step into both sides to actually be able to do so. Two represents both sides of a singular thing. Hot and cold, light and dark, masculine and feminine, all appear to be separate but are actually two sides of the same. Two is also the unmanifested duality, as it is just two lines without any solid form. As you can see in the picture, one was one line, two is two lines. Right? Two is materialism, two is science. Science is also the duality of the spiritual, I believe, or you could rephrase that as science is the duality of the unknown. The science is the philosophy of materialism and the attempt to fully know something. This is actually the only number that does not create a structured form, meaning one is a single line or a circle, three is a triangle, four is a square, etc. But two is two lines. There is no other number that cannot be turned into a whole form of a shape. Two is a relationship. Two is to fall in love. If two is your number, you may work within an area related to any of the above. And this is where I draw a comparison with two and one and how they could be used in union. Let's say 21 is your number. This could mean you could help people heal their relationships, two being the couple and one being you, or two being the couple and one making them whole. This is not to say a relationship will make someone whole, but that you can help someone to become whole within a relationship. Someone who has a two as their number could be the dedicated partner, because there's two sides to a relationship. Two could be someone who delves into different compartments of a subject individually, meaning to fully understand, they look into the theory, then the practicality separately. This is also the same for emotional states, having to walk through the different sides of emotional dualities to understand them as a singular thing. I know these are things we all do to some extent, but this is amplified in someone that is a two. Two is the alchemist or the mad scientist that performs the experiments on themselves and the reality around them. Just need to have some water. Excuse me. Just to reiterate, numbers are not a fixed language, and I think this is something that once we can remove our ego and need for control, it's an amazing thing. Fixed spoken and written language definitely has its place. For example, if you want to meet a friend at the clock tower at 12:30, you don't want to make that arrangement in metaphors and say 7,421. They'll probably just think you're a little bit weird. But for other areas, it works. Using the science and spirituality duality as an example, spoken and written language in some of its forms is the more scientific, whereas numbers in the way that I'm sharing them are the more spirit and open for more interpretation. Anyway, going back to the example of 21, this could be many things and change over time. It could be the example I shared, or it could be about bringing a duality into your life, into oneness, by seeing it in its entirety. It could also be a 3, as 2 and 1 make 3, which could be about having children or balancing your mind, body, and spirit. The fact is, numbers do have very specific meanings, but those meanings are many, and you can use your own understanding of them to interpret them in a way that makes sense to you. 3. So back to the numbers. 3 is the Trinity, which, as I mentioned, can be linked with mind, body, and spirit. It is a number of the manifested God, as it is the time when the single line takes form into the triangle. As I said before, 1 is a line, 2 is 2 lines, but 3 is when it actually makes a shape. So 1 and 3 have a very close relationship. If you think of 1 as God, as we mentioned earlier, 3 is the first time that God becomes manifested in physicality. God is the Father, Jesus the Son, and to my understanding, that Holy Spirit is the feminine, which allows the cycle to continue. Like numbers, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit can be interpreted in many ways also. I know this all sounds very religious, but as I said a moment ago, it's like metaphorical interpretations, doesn't have to be literal. I think we are all the sons and daughters of God, so there's no pedestaling any particular person, merely showing a living example of all of our potential. As I've mentioned before, God is merely the most agreed upon metaphor for the Creator, and this can be called whatever you see as our Creator. 3 is the family, as it is the mother, the father, and the child. 3 is a number of a family caregiver also, often the devoted mother. What I mean by this is some people are born to raise children, whereas others may have children but still have a devoted career or other things that are equally as important. Neither way of being is superior or inferior, just a different way of viewing the world. 3 is not always a mother, but that person who really brings the family together as a unit. 3 can represent stability, as 1 is easy to push over, 2 has nothing to prop it up. However, 3 is like the third limb, which props up the 2 wobbly legs. 3 brings the feminine to the masculine. 3 is the center of the duality. 3 is 2 becoming 1 through transcendence. 3 is also the start of ascension, the ascension code of 369. As we spoke about earlier, when you use the triangle as a metaphor, you can see the center of the bottom line leads to the ascending point of the triangle. So the central bit of the bottom line levels you up to the next point, which becomes single. 4. So 4 is the square and the physical manifestation of 2, meaning the 2 lines come to life with the square, or 4. So with this, 4 also represents materialism and science, but the manifested form of this. 4 is the number of our physical reality. In symbolism, 4 is the cross. So the Christian faith or any other faith represented by the cross can be 4. 4 is the base of the pyramid. 4 is the more masculine side of things. 4 is strength and stability. Is also the understanding of the different elements of the earth, which are earth, fire, wind, and water. 4. Also north, south, east, west comes in 4, and the 4 corners of the earth. Someone who is a 4 or has 4s within their chart could be a materialistic person, but also someone who loves to be in nature. It could also be the need to be in nature to find equilibrium. So, maybe you're not spending enough time in nature if 4s show up in specific parts of your numbers. A 4 is usually someone who needs to embrace the experience of being human and within this physical reality. It is an earthly number and could also indicate someone who likes to travel. 5, and 5 is the number of magic. The symbol of 5 is the pentagram, and if you look at the shape of the pentagram, it's like the human body with the head two arms and the two legs. Is, to my understanding, it's like the fully realized being, or someone who has the potential to fully realize themselves. Is Christ or Buddha consciousness, or the full liberation of a human being. 5 has the potential to be a prophet. We spoke of 1 being the unmanifested God, 3 the manifested God, and 5 is the God self in human form. 5 is someone who must fulfill a purpose and someone who can perform miracles, although the definition of miracle is open for debate. 5s can be the seers, and 5 is often the hermit or the isolated one who spends lots of time in his or her shell to work themselves out and eventually be able to help and aid humanity. 5 is the shaman, the fool, the wise, the 5th element of ether. 5 is the full embodiment of the 5 earthly senses, and the one who is not separate from God. 5 is a milestone, as it's halfway to 10, when 10 represents completion. 5s often carry scars that they can use to help others, or what you could call like a 5 that often is like a wounded healer. A 5 is often good with their hands and can use touch to help heal. Okay, so the next number we're going to talk about is 6, and 6 is God from the perspective of man. So the 6th sense, which can both be interpreted as psychic phenomena, but also the sense of thought. 6 is the middle ground to the ascension code of 369. 3 is the family caregiver, whereas 6 is the soul family caregiver. This is often someone who takes a position of care in the community or to the extended family. 6 creates the hexagram, which is the upwards and downwards triangle combined. This represents absolute equanimity and the complete balance of a person in the physical and spiritual sense. Is the coming together of the upward and downward energy, the masculine and feminine combined. It is related to the spine, as the spine has 33 vertebrae, like the 3 points of each triangle, and 3 and 3 make 6. This is the serpent energy within, which is the Kundalini energy flowing up and down in perfect harmony. 6 is the number we pray to. So someone who is a 6 could be a holy person or have a need for holy devotion in their life. 6s are also often people who have a specific or targeted cause, for example, an animal rights activist or an aid worker for refugees. 7. Okay, so 7's a really interesting number. It's the number of universal cycles. Excuse me. If 1 is the unmanifested God, 3 the manifested God, 5 the God man or woman or Christ consciousness, and 6 God as a point of worship, then 7 is the work of God. Now you have the 7 days of the week, 7 continents, 7 seas, the 7 body chakras, the 7 colors of the rainbow, the 7 wonders of the world, the 7 seas, 7 seals and the 7 churches, the 7 ancient sages, 7 planets excluding Earth in our solar system, the 7 archangels, 7 days of creation, the 7 walls of Jericho fell on the 7th day after 7 priests with 7 trumpets marched around the city 7 times. Have the 7 Buddhist factors of enlightenment, the 7 tablets of creation, 7 layers of Islamic heaven, the 7 gates of hell. The spiritual is 3 and the material 4, which makes 7. The 7 stages of spiritual purification, 7 stages of initiation, the 7 cardinal virtues, the 7 deadly sins, the 7 sacraments, the 7 stars of Orion. The alchemical process goes through 7 stages of purification, which are calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. So 7's works or workers of the divine, someone who brings about new cycles or brings an end to old cycles. With all this in mind, 7 is one of the most insignificant numbers mathematically and in terms of forming future numbers. You can remove 7, and to my knowledge, at least in the lower numbers, only 49, which is 7 times 7, is affected by its removal. This makes 7 one of the least significant numbers when it comes to counting, yet the most significant when it comes to universal cycles. Due to this, I see 7 as the cosmic joke. It makes no sense, but complete sense simultaneously. 7 is a paradox. What this means for someone who is a 7 is they could have a mysterious path, which is significant, but maybe not 100% clear and very changeable from moment to moment. A good example of this is someone like an archaeologist. You may have an idea of the past, but you're only ever one dig away from having your worldview shattered. Also an investigator of some form who is searching for answers within a specific field, but the answers may not be clear. You could be someone who starts or ends cycles. 7 are also builders and sculptors of physical things, but also ideas. They can also alchemize thought and physical matter and or help others to do so. 8. 8 is infinite, as the shape shows us and highlights the infinite nature within. 8 is the combination of the spiritual and physical world, with the two intertwining circles representing each. This is due to 4 being representative of the physical world and 8 being a multiple of 4. This is shown in the sentence taken from the Emerald Tablet written by Hermes, the reincarnation of the Egyptian god Thoth. As above, so below, as below, so above. This is really a loaded sentence that has many levels to it. But in a nutshell, as I spoke about earlier, is the principle of correspondence and the intricate relationship that exists between that which is above and below, or internal and external. Your body parts stand alone as a physical entity, but it is also just a small part of a bigger organism, the body. The same is true for us, and like we're just a small cog in the bigger picture of our Earth. Then the Earth in the solar system and the solar system in the universe. It also goes down to the microscopic, a world within itself, yet only a part of the bigger picture. My understanding is this is how things bigger in magnitude than us exist. We're just a small part of that bigger picture that we cannot fully see, but a significant part. If we have cancerous cells, it can spread and debilitate the body. The same for humanity and the grander scheme of things. We need to understand that we are significant, and what we do does not only affect our fellow inhabitants on this planet, but could very well have an effect to a larger organism. This is merely one aspect of as above, so below, and it can be used in many scenarios. But that's an understanding of 8. Again, it's quite a mystical number. 8s are often good at merging the physical and spiritual worlds, balancing the scientific and the mysterious. Someone who is able to stay open to both ends of the spectrum and often finds themselves able to effectively communicate and spend time with those who understand both sides of duality, either people who understand both or people who understand the single parts of that, people who are materialistic or people who are like very, very spiritual in nature, or a combination of the two. 8 is mysterious as it merges the known with the unknown. But again, they are both just parts of the same thing. Okay, so now we're on to 9, and 9 is the last number, so it represents everything in existence and all the previous numbers, or what is known as the all. 9 is also representative of the end of an era. 9 is the last level of ascension in the code of 369. 9 is completion. 9 can be thought of as impermanence and change. So 9 can lead to celebration or mourning dependent on what is ending. 9s are often those who understand that the end is coming to a specific era, whatever that may be, before the masses do, and can help those who are less aware to transition this ending. The overriding characteristic that I see as most common in 9s is their compassion to care unconditionally. I spoke about 3 being the family caregiver and 6 being the extended family caregiver. Well, 9 is the unconditional caregiver. This is the kind of characteristic that should be present, but not always is, in a doctor, a police officer, or in some kinds of healers. This is someone who sees a way to help others and just does it, regardless of prejudice and the people that need the help. This is not a job for everyone, but I do believe that inside we all have the capacity to care in this way at our core. 9s are often high energy as they have the upward energy of the 3 triangles, like you see in the image in the slide. However, the fully realized 9s see that the stacking of the 3 triangles actually create a downward triangle in the center. So this is the fluid energy of water, but also pointing to the earth, which symbolizes grounding. So, like the creation of them 3 triangles, and when you manage to fully embody that role, you realize that it's not just upward energy, but the downward energy is created as a result of that. Last is 10, and I'm not going to go into this one too much because 10 is just the new cycle. This is when it all starts again, almost from the start, but not quite. This is the start again, but the wisdom of all the previous 9 numbers, So it's like just the cycle continues. It's just 1 with the 0, So yeah, that's it. So the last thing that I just briefly wanted to touch upon before the end of this talk was many people have expressed that they were struggling with awakening or walking the path of liberation. I just wanted to say that no emotion can be avoided, no feeling will go unfelt, and in this reality we will never be immune to the potential to suffer. However, with the right intentions and more importantly, the correct training of mind through techniques such as meditation, yoga, and breath work, we can actually learn to not be so reactive to our emotions. Meaning something can be blissful without needing to be blissful tomorrow. Something can be painful without needing to be painful tomorrow. And when we cling to a state which is either perceived as positive or negative, the only result that will follow is suffering. Theoretically, this is very easy, but to live it in actuality is a lot harder. Intention is important, and to be working towards being a better version of yourself is the work that we are doing. This may not be exactly where you want. You may not be exactly where you want to be right now, but taking baby steps every single day will take you a long way over a longer period. Sometimes we just need to trust the experience and take the steps without being able to see the next step on the staircase. So I hope this talk has been helpful, and I really appreciate you coming along. Now I wanted to go and see if anyone has any questions. And I guess I didn't think this through because I won't be able to read the questions without coming off the slides. So let me see.